Coming up next on America's Hope, we'll introduce you to a talented performer of the conchlis. You might wonder what that is. It's an instrument made in Lithuania. We'll show you how she is now accomplishing her American dream. And we'll talk about public policy from a representative of the Lincoln Club of Northern California. All that and more next on America's Hope. Good evening and welcome to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and we're always happy that you can join us. And wherever you are, we hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family, because you matter. And speaking of what matters most notably to Americans is their sense of freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So our first guest tonight is Dimitriy Chebotarev. He is a member of the Lincoln Club of California. And they're public policy advocates, they're business leaders working and operating and living in California. And Dimitriy, it's good of you to join us tonight and to share your insights about America, its freedom, and the hope that you have and other members of the Lincoln Club for America. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Kelly. Good to be here.
So Dimitriy, tell me about the Lincoln Club and what the group pursues there in California, and how that translates to not just the state of California, which is the fifth leading economy in the world, but also how it impacts America.
Well, so the Lincoln Club of Orange County is the oldest and largest conservative donor group in California. I think one of the things that we're lacking both here in California and in the dialogue even nationally is balance. In California we have a supermajority of Democrats, and because of that the political balance is out of whack, and that's not good. And I would say the same thing if it was the other political party, right? When you have no balance, you have opportunity for corruption, you have certain industries thriving and under other industries that aren't doing well. So the Lincoln Club, we work to create that balance, recreate it, I should say.
And in recreating that balance, how do you achieve that, given the fact that you have just talked about and shown us in terms of what you were saying about the imbalance that exists there in California?
Well, so there are certain things that we all do agree on, right? When you watch the news, you see that Republicans and Democrats just can't agree on anything and they're not talking. But there are certain key issues that we all agree on. For example, stopping sex trafficking. That's something that both sides can objectively agree on. So there's something called Mary's Path that we heavily supported and got a lot of politicians to endorse and got that passed through here in California. It's something that creates jobs here in America. It's something that stabilizes our industrial sector. So focusing on the things that we agree on, we can help create the balance from a policy perspective. I'm the endorsement study chair, and it's my job to, when candidates come to us for endorsement, to look at their background and to make a determination with the board on whether or not we should endorse them and support them. That being said, it's not always a perfect process, but it's baby steps to try to achieve that balance.
I think it's wonderful what you're doing there to try to achieve balance from a political perspective and also from a policy side. Let's get more into the policy, because you talked about how we can all agree, whether we're left or right or conservative, liberal, we can all agree that human trafficking, sex trafficking, child exploitation is wrong. We've been reporting on that quite a bit here on America's Hope, because we believe that the hope for America is definitely within our future, and that's our children. and we have to do everything that we can to safeguard our children. You spoke about Mary's Pact. Can you tell us what that is and what type of a law that is for the state of California?
So it's helping survivors of sex trafficking, and it's getting them the resources that they need in order to be able to recover from the experiences that they had. I'll say this: the beauty of our club is that we have 350 members, and we all work on the things that we're experts in. So Mary's Path was something heavily pushed by the we have a women's leadership segment of our club, and I mean it's something we all agree on, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. Politically, a lot of times we talk about a particular issue and we get everyone riled up about it, but then there's actual work to be done to change legislation, to work with legislators. And that's something that the advocates within our club work heavily on. So it's the bottom line is it's helping people that have experienced sex trafficking get through that experience, getting the resources to them that they need.
Dmitry, that is huge, and it's a very difficult battle to fight against. But the fact that you're able to bring Democrats and Republicans and have them actually coalesce behind this is so important. And in that regard, it's important to note the positive things that can happen out of that balance of which you just spoke about. Finding that balance, that common ground to do some common good, and certainly to help survivors of sex trafficking and human trafficking is so important. So as you continue to do that, please keep us aware of how that's going. The fact that you've already accomplished it in California, and now, of course, the nation's waking up to the fact that we have a problem in America, and there is a solution, and that requires balance from both sides of the aisle coming together with some common sense approach to how we help people who have been victimized by human traffickers. You talked about another point that's national as well, and that's the supply chain. Another important policy. In that regard, where do you see the progress going and how we button up the supply chain?
On top of that, that's devastated our industrial sector, which has created a problem, in the middle class, right? In the 50s and 60s, people could get a job that would sustain their family, and now that's more difficult. Some people talk about nearshoring to allied countries like Mexico, Canada, etc. But I think the critical supply chain is something that everybody agrees needs to be onshored. What I mean by that is things like military, things like pharmaceutical, that's nothing new. There's been a lot of discussion about that, but also things as simple as semiconductor chips, steel, plastics, expanding our rail infrastructure. That last point, so much, we at this point assume that things need to be transported across the country by truck, but that's the least efficient way of doing it. For a long time, we used rail. Rail can transport very heavy loads for very cheap with a very minimal environmental impact. And if there's an expanded rail infrastructure, that helps our supply chain significantly. And it makes us less reliant on, for example, Chinese steel, which is low quality, and it's just flooding the market. So things like that, onshoring, creating more jobs domestically is something that everybody can get behind. I think the biggest issue is while Democrats and Republicans agree that, hey, we should get this done, it's the devil's in the details of how we get it done. And the communication both within a particular party, Democrats communicating with other Democrats and Republicans communicating with other Republicans and in between, is where things can break down and take a long time. So what we've been doing is working with members of the House, members of the Senate, to get that private sector feedback to them about what each industry believes it needs in terms of incentives, in terms of what will encourage private companies to onshore their business practices. That's something that unfortunately isn't done enough. And encouraging senators to get involved with, House members early on in the process so that they can get their feedback to members of the House. We assume that happens much more than it does.
Yeah, Dmitry, you're pointing out some things that are just problematic, and yet we can solve it if we can become more bipartisan and more bicameral out of Washington, and certainly the Lincoln Club is seeking to do that. I applaud you for your efforts in doing that, especially on the issue of supply chain and the fact that so many jobs can be born and cultivated here in America, which benefits all Americans. Certainly that is part of America's hope, to see that many Americans are able to achieve exactly what I said at the top of the show: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And then you also talked about something that's very important, and that is, what do we do with those adversarial governments that are against us? And I understand the lay of the land in terms of doing global business, but not to the detriment of America's future. In that regard, what are your concerns about the fact that we have become too reliant on China?
I would say, and by the way, remember I told you, if you get me started on this, I'm not going to stop. I would say, look, China has been a source of cheap labor, and that is where the whole concept started. And if we create more opportunity within China, their dictatorial communist regime will turn more Western, right? That was the philosophy. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and we see that didn't happen. On the labor side, on the sex trafficking side, there's a lot of big fundamental problems with how things are run over there. It's not a free country. Like, they don't have the freedom of speech that we have. I'd say they are more reliant on our economy than we are on theirs. But if that happened today, then we would have some big problems, both on the defense side, the pharmaceutical side, steel, plastics, everything that we use on a daily basis. And that's a problem.
That is a problem from a national perspective with regard to our national security, as well as just our stability as a nation. Dmitry, I'm enjoying our conversation. It's very insightful and informative. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the Lincoln Club, and while it's informational, it's also inspirational. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Dimitriy Chebotarev, who is a board member of the Lincoln Club of Northern California, Orange County to be exact. And Dmitry, in our previous segment, you were talking about how 350 members of your organization have been able to reach across the aisle. You're a conservative group, and yet you're working with people who don't always operate the way you do. You're working with liberals, you're working with Democrats, you're working with Republicans, or at least you're making the attempt to do that, to bring that balance of government that is so critical to America and its future. I want to ask you, in addition to the information that you provide, your group is also inspirational and aspirational in bringing America together to concentrate on those fundamental things that Americans need to sustain their hope, and a hope that prevails to improve their home life, their family life, life for their neighbors, their community, their state, and therefore the nation. Talk to me about some of those programs that you're involved in.
Well, I'd say, the word conservative has a bad connotation to it nowadays. And it's because in the media, you hear that, conservatives are this and that. Ultimately, a conservative individual is someone who believes in the individualism of a human being. So what that means to me is you and I can have a conversation for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and we're going to disagree. That's going to happen. There's things that we'll agree on, there's things that we'll disagree on. But as long as we respect each other, then we can make progress in what we can actually do together. And there's within our club, we have disagreements all the time, but we talk about it, we determine what an actionable step is, and then we take action. And that's what we encourage in the conversations we have with legislators. Just the other day we were talking to the staff of a senator, and they were saying, well, once this gets to, about the supply chain, and they said, once this gets to the Senate, then we'll take a look at it. And we explained to them, well, once it gets to the Senate, then your opinions are going to already be, potentially blocked out. Get your opinion in early while it's in the House and create that higher level of communication. And then you're not going to be kicking yourself later. And that simple message resonated with them to the point where they got engaged. That's whether we agree or disagree, as long as we're taking action, that's what's important. And I think that that's something that we encourage heavily.
Yeah, encouraging the proper action to take, and that's having dialogue with each other and realizing the bottom line is that we're all in this together. We are United States of America. It doesn't go well if you say divided states of America. I have a habit of sometimes saying that Congress is in good of some old-fashioned CPR. Yeah, some cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but also Congress performing responsibly. And in order to do that, Dimitriy, you know and I know that people have to come together, get out of their echo chambers and their different silos on the left and the right, and come together in the middle to have that bipartisan dialogue and that bicameral dialogue between the House and the Senate, to have an honest discussion that is fundamental to our future growth in this country. Does the Lincoln Group espouse that kind of approach?
So what I would say we encourage the most is education, because a lot of the things that we see on TV, and it's almost funny because we're taught when we're young by our parents that, hey, don't believe everything you see on TV, right? And yet we watch politicians on TV performing for the audience, and we take that all as fact. It happens on both sides. The fact of the matter is there's much more communication and coordination. Our government isn't falling apart, and if there wasn't communication and coordination, it would be falling apart. So what I would say is we encourage people to determine why they believe what they believe, right? A lot of the things that are thrown at us in the media don't give us a backing of why we should believe that. And when you start to question, well, why do I believe a particular thing? Why is this message constantly being thrown at me, whether it's by the left or the right?
Yeah.
And you question that message and you determine what you actually believe and why you believe it, then you can come to a much more solid truth. Yeah. And generally, we're all on the same page. We're all more moderate than we actually believe.
I like the way you say that. And Dimitriy, your signal's breaking up on us, so that might be an indication that it's time for us to go. But before I go, real quickly, I got to ask you, and I love what you just unpacked there, because we do talk about finding common ground on this show. What is your hope for America?
My hope for America is that people educate themselves on actual policy and pay attention to what we're being told, why we're being told it, and think critically about the messaging that we're being given by both sides, and then vote accordingly to their belief.
Dimitriy, I appreciate you coming on. You represent the Lincoln Club of California very well, my friend. Dimitriy Chebotarev, thanks for joining us and sharing your insights about what we have to do in this nation to always maintain hope, and as I said before, that common ground to aspire to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
We'll be back with more in just a moment. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm delighted that you're with us this hour. And now we're going to introduce to you a young lady from Lithuania. She now lives in the United States, and she is finding that music is her way of getting to show people that there is hope and that it does prevail. Her name is Simona Smirnova, and she plays an unusual instrument that is originally made, and it's indigenous to her home country of Lithuania. Welcome to America's Hope. So good to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Look, first of all, when you and I met, we were talking about music. You had been talking to your manager and I believe your publicist, and I overheard this wonderful conversation about the hope that you have for the world through the power of your music. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about music and how empowering it is and freeing it is in terms of giving people hope.
Yes, well, music is an amazing tool to spread the message of joy, of hope, of happiness, maybe even problematic message or something like that. We all listen to music, right? We sit in the taxi, we hear music, we listen to it at home, we have it as a background music. Sometimes we go to the shows, we have attentive listening when we're listening to an orchestra or we're in a jazz club. Music is all around, and it really, we all had those cathartic moments where we feel that music just takes us to a different place, right? So it just grabs our heart and takes us somewhere. So, and especially instrumental music, also vocal music, but let's talk about instrumental music because it can mean so many things. And one person can hear a question, sorrow, sadness, mourning, a lot of problematic things in the same piece of music as the other person would hear joyful things, right? So it captures us all, and we all, of course, have preferences. So I chose in my personal calling that music is my way to communicate with people and find connection. And that's what we're all about, right? We're trying to find connection with friends, with family, and with people from the wider perspective. So at this point, I always try to compose with sort of context and theme behind. And I've released 4 albums, and all of them had a very specific theme. But now I feel that the most current thing is our world, our planet. And I'm very passionate about spreading the world, about human connection to one another, to yourself. And because if you connect it to yourself, you can easier connect to the other people and to the world around us, to the nature, to animals, to plants. And this is very important and crucial at this day and age, right? So if I take this as a mission and I start composing songs about, let's say, recycling, it's a very specific thing, but people don't want it. They don't want to be taught or sort of like taught in a certain specific way. But if we kind of flatter and entertain that ancestral side, a part of individual person, each of us inside, it naturally brings us closer to the planet. And if we're closer to the planet, we do not want to harm
the absolutely.
planet, right?
I mean, we have to take care of the planet. And in your talk like that, you're reminding me of the late and great Marvin Gaye, who wrote Mercy, Mercy Me, the ecology, and he was talking about what we need to do to take care of each other and to take care of the planet. And in doing that, musically, you've been able to do so much. Like you said, you have 4 albums. You also have a book that's out now, and you're traveling around the world, born in Lithuania. What made you come to the United States to expand your music? Because you're widely known in your home country. You've performed for the president there, and actually you've performed the national anthem here in America. Talk to me about this experience from Lithuania to America.
Well, everybody wants to be in the United States, right? But it definitely wasn't my dream from the beginning. I come from very humble beginnings, and the idea of coming to the US came only at the end of my undergrad studies. So I come from the village. I played the instruments all the time. I played the kankles, the Lithuanian folk zither, since I was 7 years old. And then when I studied my undergrad, which was jazz vocal performance, I thought that I need to get better if I want to actually create life for myself make it as a working, thriving career, it has to be something more than just vocal performance studies in Lithuania. So that's why I just tried my luck, I guess, and I auditioned and I got a scholarship and I moved to Boston in 2012, which is 11 years ago, exactly 11 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
Congratulations. So you made the decision all the way from Lithuania, and as you said, you grew up by humble means. It must have seemed impossible that you would ever get accepted into Berkeley and then thrive and succeed there.
Absolutely. I still cannot believe that happened. I feel like my whole life is just like I won a jackpot or something. I think about it, I work hard for it, but then I cannot believe that actually happened. I cannot believe that I actually created a life for myself in New York City. When someone just mentioned that idea, how about you go to Berkeley? And I said, no way. It's like, there's no way I can get accepted or find the means for it. But secretly, as the whole situation passed, the person left, I secretly went on Google and I Googled Berklee College of Music and I checked out the dates and I'm like, how about I just try to audition? Just try. The hope, right? You still have the linger, even though with sort of objective thinking, that's not possible. At that time, we were still on our local currency, which is litas. The money is like completely different.
Yeah.
But I, like, one thing at a time. I always try to use this parallel with a car, right? When we drive, we see just certain amount of light. So we don't see like all 50 kilometers or miles away. We see just a little bit, but we get from A to B. So that's why I always try to remind myself, like, I see just a little bit and I trust and I have hope and I keep continuing and I will get from A to B as long as I know what B is.
Simona, but that's actually great because you came here, like you said, not knowing what your future would hold. And the reason why I wanted you to come in and share your story is because it's a powerful narrative about someone born and raised in Lithuania, plays the konklas, which is an amazing instrument, and we're going to show people some of the work that you do. I just find it refreshing that you had this hope, and now you came here to America spreading that hope, and you saw your hope fulfilled. That's an amazing story.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad you see it this way. But it's kind of, it's not a goal, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
It's a journey,
so
exactly.
It's constantly evolving, and there's a lot of work to do in this world.
And it was not easy.
No. Sometimes I just want to cry thinking about the past, but we did overcame it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the past a little bit, because you mentioned that you grew up poor. And there are many people, even in this country, who have grown up poor. There are many, look, America is made up of a melting pot of people from all backgrounds, wealthy, middle class, poor. They're from different countries. We're just a melting pot of people, a melting pot of humanity that comes together. And the one thing I love about this show is that we try to find that common ground that exposes our common good to help each other. So let's talk about your past a little bit.
Well, there's a lot of bumpy moments. First, I guess the very beginning, I was raised in a farm. My dad used to be a veterinarian. We had a lot of animals, and that was after Soviet Union collapsed. So there was a very different regimes, the change of regimes. I was also born at a very specific time when the revolution started. That's why I'm such a rebellious baby. And for people who are from the Baltic states, they might be familiar with that term. It's when we went out to the streets and to the highways and we sang. We didn't have weapons, we sang for our freedom, right? And
okay, that's amazing. That's why I wanted you to share this story.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but let's look at that for a moment. You sang a revolution. You didn't have weapons that were like, guns and bullets. You sang a revolution.
Yeah.
Please explain to us what that was like.
It's manifestation of music. It's the power of music. We use the means we have, and that was our singing and unity. People would gather together for nights and days, and they would just burn bonfires and hold hands. I get goosebumps when I talk about it.
Yeah.
We have this phenomenon which is called Baltic Way or Baltic Chain, where people stood in 1989 in August, actually, which is that's the month. So families, children, women and men stood across 3 Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, without interruption, standing through the highway connecting all 3 countries and just singing for the whole day, showing the world, not only Soviet Union, but the world, that we are independent countries and we have our identity and we are strong and everybody's here, children and adults. And this is so powerful. I wish I could have been there, but I was just 1 year old.
That's right. But your family has passed that on to you.
Yes.
Do they ever sing some of those songs to you?
No, actually, that's a sadder part. I never really got that from family that much, but I did get that a lot of in school.
In school.
Like, yeah, from teachers, from friends. And since I played the national instrument, so I had to learn all the folk songs in the world.
Yeah.
So that kind of came to me through schooling, definitely. So revolutionary beginnings and very unstable times in the country. Obviously, it was very hard for us too. And then we pretty much lacked all the time. Then mom raised us two by herself, and we liked every single thing. I honestly, when I think about it, it's kind of funny, but not funny, that my first album is called The Hunger Artist. But when I think of a hunger, actually I think that from the beginning until like 18, I was actually constantly hungry all the time. It was like a normal state to me. And I remember all these moments where you are being isolated, like you play with the kids on the playground, and at certain time, at 6 p.m., everybody got called by their parents to eat dinner, but I wasn't called, right? And now I can say it with a light heart because, you know, I've done my work.
Yeah.
But there is a certain amount of time where it was hard to own that story because there's shame attached to it, right? Although as a baby, as a kid, you don't really carry it. But
see it, yeah.
But now I feel like there's power, and it's like this chamber of source of power when you owning your story, right? And I own it, that it was hard. I was left alone. All the kids going for dinner, I'm not going for dinner. All the kids going for field trips, Simona is not going to field trips. But I found my way of being resilient even as a kid, and I found my outlet, which is also music and arts, which I loved, and it kept me really focused, and it created a life for me. So it was hard from the beginning, and when I moved to the US, it was even harder. Even harder. So there's a lot of stories, you know, of like not having phone for half a year. One time I came to the class, this one, everybody loves the stories, when my shoes started breaking on the way to the class.
Oh, wow.
But breaking that way that, you know, you really can't walk. So I'm like, okay, what's my options? Option 1, go to the Students' Activity Center or sort of like a office and tape it. 2, go home. 3, go barefoot. So I'm like, well, how about taping it? So I go and I tape those shoes and I go, and specifically that day the class was in circle and everybody's sitting and I'm with the taped shoes and I'm so embarrassed. And
this is at Berkeley?
This was at Berkeley.
In Boston.
In
You have
Boston.
taped shoes, and,
Yes,
and
yes.
how did they respond?
Well, the girl next to me said, I like how you taped your shoes. I think professor tried to show that he doesn't see it. Yeah, it was very embarrassing. I had many of those stories, but I always try to keep reminding myself that I chose it, right? No one pushed me to this. I chose it. I came it, and I know that everything great in this world comes with a price. Am I willing to pay it? I am willing to pay it. And it was very hard. First 3 years, it was really hard, but then it got better, and now it's
Where
really
you are
good.
now. That's fantastic. We're going to take a slight break. I'm talking to Simona Smirnova of Lithuania, and just an incredible story of her resiliency as well as her ability to turn pain into power. And when we come back, we'll talk more about her passion for music and the wonderful instrument that she plays. That's next on America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright. I'm sitting with a very talented lady, Simona Smirnova, born in Lithuania, saw her family go through a cultural revolution and a real revolution to break away from the tyranny of the Soviet Union. And you were just one at the time, but this story has been handed down to you to know what Lithuanians and other people from the Baltic states actually went through. And now we see the unrest going on with Ukraine and Soviet Union, or actually Russia now. And I think it's good that we remind people around the world what was at stake back then, freedom. And what's at stake now? Freedom for the Ukrainian people, as well as for people who are enduring that type of pain and warfare. When you look at that and you see America responding in such a way in terms of supporting Ukrainians, the Ukrainian area, do you have any feeling about what you're seeing?
Well, I do see, especially when I witnessed the NATO summit in Lithuania was at the same time, but also at the same time, it's not really my area of expertise to comment on this, I would say.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And that's a very wise decision. So let me ask you, with all that you've been through, and now you're doing your music around the world, you're teaching the conchas to people who want to know how to play this unusual instrument that was created in your country. Talk to me about that instrument, because it has a great sound, and I actually watched you play it during the national anthem. In fact, let's take a moment and we'll watch you presenting the national anthem in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall. Let's watch.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight? Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, their bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the
You know, that's a powerful presentation of the national anthem using your own native instrument to Lithuania and then singing as well. So not only are you gifted musically in terms of playing your instrument, but you also use your instrument, which is your voice. What was that night like for you, singing the national anthem?
I felt so honored. Really, I just wanted to cry. I felt like I cannot believe I'm doing it. And you know, as an artist, we prepare songs. If it's, let's say, if it's not our composition, we try to make it dear to us, think about what it really means. And every artist, before they go on stage, they think like, how do I want to make people feel about it, right? So different songs have different feelings, but this is the national anthem, so it's very different. So it brings the sense of unity and pride, right? This is what anthems, we stand together as a nation, we are together. And I thought about it, and with this opportunity to sing the Star-Spangled Banner, I actually again thought how grateful I am for my life in the United States and how many great opportunities it's given me. And one of them is being free, being myself. Because as I mentioned before, like in Lithuania, with a lot of times I would stick out a little bit. And here I felt so always and continuously feeling welcomed and being myself. So when I sang that anthem, I felt like my gratitude. With my talents, I can honor this country and I can share that. And I think people really felt it. They really felt it. And I felt that electricity in the, when I say room, but that was arena. So
Yeah.
a big room.
A big room, yeah. Well, it was a wonderful night for you, and there have been many since then. Musically, as you stated earlier in the previous segment, you have 4 albums. and you're currently working on a new one. I wanted to ask you specifically about one album, Joan of Arc. What gave you the impetus to do that one?
It came sort of natural, in a natural way. I was looking for the next thing to do, and I always loved visuals, like movies. And one friend of mine, he owned like a gallery where they would do screenings, and he just offered it to me. He said, "We do silent film screenings. Would you be interested in composing a score for a silent film screening?" And that was the silent film from 1928, I want to say, The Passion of Joan of Arc. So at that moment, I haven't seen the movie. I watched it. I couldn't believe what I've seen it because it's so ahead of its time. It's beautiful, and it was very hard because it's very emotional. But I said yes, and I did compose the score, and then I started performing it. And from that point, I was moving from Boston to New York, so I started showing it in New York. I showed it in Maine. And I kept showing, and I really felt like it's a very strong project for people to come and see the movie while I'm conducting a string quartet and singing along with it, and there's a live score to it. It's also a very special experience to conduct and create a live score right away in the real time. But then when the COVID happened, I wasn't able to perform, so I was thinking that I have this whole score which is not used right now, so how about I'm recording it? So I just used that score, which was performed at first, into more of a thematic system, and so people can actually, when they listen to it, see and follow John's trial and suffering. So it's a very, very sad, but also at the same time so dear and so hopeful to me, because Joan gave hope to many, many people ahead of her, many women in the future, and to me. And that's sort of like gentle and strong at the same time qualities merged together, and I love that. I feel like I'm this way too. Like I'm so sensitive in a way, and my heart is so big for each animal and each bug and each plant, but at the same time strong. I overcome things. I go strongly with discipline and power. So just like John. So I think there is a personal touch to it, of course. Of
course there is, and you're still young, you have the world ahead of you. What's your message to young Americans?
Well, I think we are already great in being free and welcoming other people, their differences, the way they are. I think my message is to care for the planet. That's the main thing, to really be cautious and mindful about the consumption we do, the everyday things we do, and really care for the air, for the water, for the indigenous species, educate ourselves about it. It's very important. We have just one home, and it's our planet.
You raise that issue, and of course that's what a lot of young people are concerned about, climate. They're concerned about the indigenous species. So many species are actually on an endangered species list. We've seen the wildfires in Canada. We've seen the wildfires in California, and of course the firestorm that has taken place, decimating and incinerating Lahaina in Maui in Hawaii. As we see these natural disasters creep on us and happen at a more rapid pace, I think it's good that you're making music about the planet, making people be aware of how they can better safeguard the planet. What's next for you?
So the next, I feel like I'm a very joyous transitional mode. I always loved visual aspects like costumes and colors and dance. So I've had these 4 albums and the Kankles book, but I feel like the next album will be very sparkly, and it will be like ode to joy almost. It will be a part of joyful Simona. So it will be more dance, celebrating live joy, celebrating connection with other people, and just being happy and playful.
And so, and with that, you're presenting a concert, I understand.
Yes.
When is that taking place?
Which I would love to invite everyone to come. It's on October 18th at the Cutting Room in Manhattan.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the Kankles, we want to leave people with a good visual of what the Kankles can do when you're just playing jazz. And we want to thank you for being a guest on America's Hope and dropping by to give us a full measure of hope. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to America's Hope. My final word tonight is to first of all thank our guests, Simona Smirnova, as well as Dimitriy Chebotarev. Both of them have shown us how America is still a beacon of hope. Yeah, we have things to work through in terms of our government and how we function, but the bottom line is that we all have this fundamental sense of belonging, united and not divided. And as Simona has shown us, there's power in music to share hope around the world. So whatever you're doing, America, take time out to appreciate the fact that we are united. And we're stronger when we're united than we are divided. So keep spreading love, freedom, and peace, and never extinguish hope. Until next time, America, good night. Your America and my America.
United we stand, divided